Yeah, we are in Book 7, Canto 3. We said this is a very important canto from the point of view of sadhana and yoga. Because it is a canto which is describing somebody's actual experience of the discovery of one's soul. We have heard so many cases of great yogis and saints and avatars who have spoken about their own discovery, the way they went out to discover the truth, they said. And there is a line here in the same canto. She knew that first she must discover her soul. Only who save themselves can others save. I think that's the center, that's the crux of this canto. And not only of this canto, that is the essential message of all spirituality. Be the master in the West, in the East, in China, anywhere and everywhere. The truth is that one must first discover one's soul, and only who save themselves can others save. So save themselves in the sense of finding out their own truth. It's they who can help others, who can save others, who can lead others. All other ways of leading, trying to help, they're all superficial, external, and temporary. I mean, look at all the famous incarnations. We have the Buddha who went in search of the truth. What for? To save others. Because he was so disturbed by these four noble truths of life, old age and death and disease and liberation, the sannyasin. He wanted to find out the why, how to save mankind from this disease and death and old age and all that. So you see, he didn't go to a doctor, he didn't go to a psychologist, he didn't go to a library to find out. He said, first let me find out the truth, and that truth in myself, and that truth by myself. So he went out into the forest, and the rest of the story we all know. We had the same question with Christ. We had the same question with Muhammad. So everyone who accosted this question of the reality of life and how to save and help mankind, first of all they found out their own truth. And truth inward, the truth that is inside, the truth by oneself. And not to go to any external, outer kind of aid. And this has been exactly the same thing in the life of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. In fact, what is amazing is none of these great masters start helping the other, the humanity, the society, the community, before they realize they find out their soul. And this phrase, to find out one's soul, has come so very often in this canto, telling us again and again that all attempts to help, to transform, to change is of no consequence unless and until you find out the truth yourself. That is why the reiteration, finding out one's soul. So typically in the tradition of all spiritual pursuits, Savitri too is on her journey to find out the soul. And I do see the point in this kind of a search for the soul, because by finding one's own inner truth, by discovering, then you get identified with the other. And by this identification with the other, then you know the other's problem. Then you cannot, the question of sympathize is no more, it is not a kind of a emotional sympathy. Identification gives the strength, the means to transfer knowledge, consciousness, power, peace, bliss. If there is no identification, the master or the guru cannot transfer. Because you have seen in India and elsewhere, you know better in the West, the master, the guru, they don't have to necessarily speak too many words. Most of the gurus in India, they're not big orators and speakers and writers. They're quiet. Once in a day, once in a while, they may advise you a sentence or two. They may tell you what to do. And rest is the presence, the silence, the transfer. And this transfer can take place only if you know your own psychic being or the soul. And it's a wonderful example to see Sri Aurobindo's own letters. It's amazing to see how he can solve each one's problems according to the nature of his problem. It's not a mentalization, it is not the question saying, you do this, it's not a generalization. So each sadhak felt, yes, the answer is for me. Each sadhak said, yes, I am already better. Yes, I feel the strength. The secret of this is identification. Because realizing my soul, I get connected with your soul. And once I get connected with your soul, then I can get connected with your being, the mental, the vital, the physical. So this is the modus operandi of the spiritual master. And any other means of philanthropy is a kind of a mental, emotional sympathy. And Mother does speak about this, saying that yes, one can help the others on the 4 different levels: physical, vital, mental, spiritual. And the true spiritual master helps you on the spiritual level. The rest of us, we help on the mental level. We send psychiatrists, we send doctors, we send counselors. When something happens to a person, that is on the mental, psychological level. Then we have the emotional level. Somebody is struck by earthquake, the family is ruined, so people, relatives, friends, they go and really sympathize with them, hug them, keep them together and give them company. And on the physical level, you impart material, food and shelter, food and clothes. So she says, yes, one can help the other on all different levels, but only the real help is that of the spiritual. That alone can really help that sorrowful man, that sad person, to regain and rebuild his own life and self-confidence and get going on the path. Other help, this time that we have, the shelter and the food, they are there to kind of take off. But that which is lasting is the spiritual. So in India we have had this immense tradition, intense tradition of the ashrams. Because there is the spiritual master who, having realized his inner being to some extent, I would not say to heights, but still, this kind of a self-discovery, as we will see in Savitri also, brings you some kind of an impersonality. So this is the difference. When I and you, we identify with the other, is a personal identification. That means she is my spouse or child or children or father. It's a personalization which is not very large and which is not very deep. But an impersonal identification is very broad, because I don't have an emotional attachment. So my field of helping others can be very vast and very deep. So most of these figures whom you see are really realized, their arena of help is very large. I mean, I know a few names, you must be knowing others, like Sri Ramakrishna or Sri Ramana or Vivekananda or this Guru. So you see this immense, we had the Buddha, we had the great Confucius, we had the Lao Tse, we have so many saints in the West. So these are the people who can really spread wide. If your personal, your help is very narrow, just circumscribing to your family, to your friends, to your caste and creed and your... But the one who has really, the greater the depth of your identification with your soul, the vaster and intenser is your area of help. So I can understand these are the things that are required by Savitri before she can launch on wanting to help humanity by the conquest of death. So the conquest of death is the highest and the most intensest and the longest that humanity has been suffering from. So Savitri's mission is to conquer death. But for that she has not only to get into recognize and realize her own psychic being, but she must find out her own transcendental self. Because it's not a small thing to say, take out a little disease, bring harmony, bring peace, give you quietness of mind. For that the psychic realization is sufficient. But to take up the challenge of the conquest of death requires huge power, a very high intensity of power. And that power can be gained only the supramental power or what we call the transcendental power. So Savitri, first thing is to realize her own psychic being. So that is why so many times Sri Aurobindo has repeated almost the same phrase, she must discover her soul, she must discover her soul. And I told you many a time that this has been as Mother herself says somewhere, I think, I have told you endlessly, that first discover your psychic being. You see, of course it doesn't mean first means is not the question of withdrawing or retreating to any forest. But the focus of life is that. It may take you 40 years, 50 years, you may reach your 60th year or 70th year. But the thing is, what has been the focus of your life? You may be doing your job, you may be doing your work, we are not saying live life, don't be an ascetic. But the focus is this. Instead of saying, do I get a name, do I get a fame, do I get money, do I get comfort, which can distract the little energy that we have to focus. So, umpteen number of times the Mother also has been telling in her class and to the children and has been writing in letters too. Now I understand the necessity of that, because without that all other activities are shunya, zero. They are more a social drumming, your ego drumming, as somebody was telling, blowing your own trumpet. So all that is big, loud noise, sound and fury, as says Shakespeare. So this is actually our normal life, the sound and fury. But then what the mother tells us, what the parampara, what the ageless wisdom tells us is this pursuit. Then the little help will go a long way. All other help is only an eyewash. So we see in Savitri also that kind of an attempt. And again, typically we see, as I told you last time in my classes, that the moment she says, I have to discover, she goes within. She doesn't go out. But this is a kind of a symbolic psychological journey which has been exemplified by the other masters of spirituality by going out. We know the Buddha went out into the forest. Christ went out into a forest. Muhammad goes out into the desert. You see, everyone is going out in search of the soul. Of course, there in those places they do get that experience. So that going out is a kind of a journey within. As I told you umpteen times, the journey within is the journey outside. And you see, more or less we have always, except a few cases of going into the desert, most of the cases are going into the mountains or the forests. And the forests are in Savitri the symbol of life. So they are actually going into the forest, but in a psychological manner, into the very essence of life. It's not the external life and society and contacts and relationship, but the essence of life. And we see very interestingly, Savitri too gets into that plane of life, into that zone of life. And here today what we are going to take up is that journey into the zone of life itself. And so I'll take up on page 558, if you have marked your passages. The line is, then all grew still and empty, she was free. It is, she had just come into the plane of life in between, and when she was being sucked into this into life and its disturbances, out of the dreadful press she dragged her will, and fixed her thought upon the Saviour name. Then all grew still and empty, she was free. You see, this is an experience that will repeat itself in Savitri's case, because she is, as the line says, this state now threatened, this she pushed from her, as if in a long, endless, tossing street, one driven mid a trampling, hurrying crowd. Hour after hour she trod without release, holding by her will the senseless mute at bay. Out of the dreadful press she dragged her will, and fixed her thought upon the Saviour name. You see, it's a very interesting line. My page is 557. 491. Yeah. So this is again a very beautiful hint that we get here, that when we are in the thick of life, not only thick, I would say enmeshed in life, and all that she says here, holding one driven mid a trampling, hurrying crowd, etc. You see, very significantly, we get the line, and Savitri fixed her thought upon the Saviour name, then all grew still and empty, she was free. So this Saviour name seems to be the secret of maintaining the inner contact. You are in life, but you are not sucked by this life and its environment. What we in India we call the Japa Yoga, jap when we say repeating the Lord's name. Because oftentimes it is said in India that the name of God is more powerful than God Himself. So that's why Sri Aurobindo calls it the Saviour name in capital. And as I told you already that this was there in the case of Ashwapati also. So that means fixing a thought. You see, you cannot remember God or name of the God or any particular God without constantly remembering or being consciously in a higher consciousness. You see, if you are in a very low consciousness, you cannot remember the divine. So very fact that Swami says, she fixed her thought. That means the focus of all her attempt is the divine consciousness. So when you remember the divine, then you remember the divine's name. So it's one and the same. You cannot be doing the name without the consciousness. But what it means is that she is conscious somewhere of the inner pursuit, and so she pulled herself, as she puts it in the previous line, out of the dreadful press. She dragged her will. I mean, she had to really put in a lot of effort to see that, to focus on the divine. Now she is free. But she is free from one level of consciousness, but she goes into the other one. A large deliverance came, a vast calm space. A while she moved through a blank tranquility of naked light from an invisible sun. A void that was a bodiless happiness, a blissful vacuum of nameless peace. So this was, she's coming out of the senses, the sense world which had tried to attract her, but then with the name of the Lord she comes out, she's delivered, she's in a vast calm space, and then she has in a void that was a bodiless happiness, a blissful vacuum of nameless peace. But now a mightier dangerous front drew near, the press of bodily mind. The inconscious brood of aimless thought and will had fallen from her. So this was the stage where we see the web of the senses, the inconscious brood as he calls it, has fallen from her. Now the next phrase is, what is interesting is, you see, if you remember, to give you a recap, we had first seen her experience of the inconscience. Then there is the level of the form, because after the inconscience is formless. Then the very first thing that emerged out of this formlessness is form, which we call otherwise matter. So she comes into the level of form, matter. The moment there is matter, there are the senses, we touch matter. So there is the world of the senses. But now out of the senses, she comes out, and what does she get? Approaching loomed a giant head of life, ungoverned by mind or soul, subconscient, vast. So this is a very important phrase. We see that this life's zone, or the kingdom of life as he calls it, it is ungoverned by mind or soul. It's the initial level of life. There's no governing, there's no control. We have to remember this because later on we will see the same life governed by mind, governed by reason. So what happens to life that is governed by reason? And then the next level we see life governed by the soul. Then what is the change? So that's why I'm drawing your attention to this word, ungoverned by mind or soul. It tossed all power into a single drive. It made its power a might of dangerous seas. Now what is important is, here you will see life at its initial level, which is full of power, energy, opposite things, contrasting things. It's quite a pell-mell thing. So now Savitri, you see, again she is having to discover the entire evolutionary process, comes to the peak of her discovery, then she says, oh, beyond all this, there's the discovery of the soul. So that's the journey we are seeing now. So she comes into life, and there she sees a might of dangerous seas, into the stillness of her silent self, into the whiteness of its muse of space, a spate, a torrent of the speed of life, broke like a wind-lashed driven mob of waves racing on a pale floor of summer sand. You see, here comes the poet describing the surge and upheaval and the speed of life. He says the speed of life, a torrent of the speed of life, broke like a wind-lashed driven mob of waves. You see, as a poetic imagery, the mob of waves, a beautiful phrase. Driven mob of waves were racing on a pale floor of summer sand. If you stand on the seashore, you will see the waves coming one after the other on the summer sand, touching the sand, going back. So he calls it a mob of waves. And then another imagery. It drowned its banks a mountain of climbing waves. Enormous was its vast and passionate voice. It cried to her listening spirit as it ran, demanding God's submission to chainless force. So now this life force is so tremendous, so powerful, it is even demanding God to submit himself to it. A deaf force calling to a status dumb, 1,000 voices in a muted vast, it claimed the heart's support for its clutch at joy, for its need to act, the witness soul's consent, for its lust of power, her neutral being sealed. You see, life, as we say here, we have talked about it, there is a question of Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is the witness divine, the witness being within. Prakriti is the outer being. That Prakriti is that life field. So Prakriti has to enact and manifest what the Purusha is giving the consent, as they are asking her to do. So there is a kind of an exuberance. It says, for its need to act, the witness soul's consent, the Prakriti is, full of this power and says, I have to manifest what the Purusha has told me. So it is really coming up in big waves of ocean, mob of waves, etc. But all that to fulfill life's zeal. Into the wideness of her watching self, it brought a grandiose gust of the breath of life. Its torrent carried the world's hopes and fears, all life's, all nature's dissatisfied hungry cry, and the longing all eternity cannot fill. You see, what a stupendous thing this life is, that it brings out the longing of Prakriti, it brings out nature, but it brings out a desire, a longing that all eternity cannot fill, because it's not the question of I'm fulfilling life and it comes to an end. There is this life energy going from one to the other, one form to the other. My form may be gone after that while, but the life energy is never gone. And that's, I think, what Sri Aurobindo tells us in the Life Divine, that this element of life is there in everything, what we call death. Death also, why does he call it? Is a process of life. Because when a body is dead, he says again there is a life force which is decomposing it. How does a body get decomposed? There is some energy working, there is a life force working. So right till the end, when the body is active, when it is dead, when it goes into the earth or into the fire, there is life energy. And the same life energy which has unformed the thing and then it reformed the thing. So you would say it's life that is universal, not death. Death is only a process of its making and unmaking and remaking. So we see that kind of a longing all eternity cannot fill. It called to the mountain secrecies of the soul and the miracle of the never-dying fire. It spoke to some first inexpressible ecstasy hidden in the creative beat of life. Out of the nether unseen deeps it tore its lure and magic of disordered bliss. Into earthlight poured its maze of tangled charm. and heady draught of nature's primitive joy, and the fire and mystery of forbidden delight, drunk from the world libido's bottomless well, and the honey-sweet poison wine of lust and death, but dreamed a vintage of glory of life's gods, and felt as celestial rapture's golden sting. Well, here, of course, we can't get into the details, but it's only in general to say that what are the different achievements. I mean, it is this life force which achieves all these things, draught of nature's primitive joy, forbidden delight, world libido's bottomless well, honey-sweet poison wine. They're all the shades, manifestations, forms of life, what we have. But a beautiful line that I want to tell you is this one: honey-sweet poison wine of lust and death. You see how it describes lust? It is honey-sweet poison wine. This all lust that we think is there, is sweet, no doubt, but it is a poison wine, and which leads you to death. And then it says, the cycles of the infinity of desire. I mean, what a powerful sentence. The cycles of the infinity of desire. You see, desire can never be quelled, can never be stopped. It is always, as it says, infinity of desire, and there's a cycle. It comes and goes on the mental level, on the physical level, vital level. So, the cycles of the infinity of desire and the mystique that made an unrealized world wider than the known and closer than the unknown, in which hunt forever the hounds of mind and life, tempted a deep dissatisfied urge within to long for the unfulfilled and ever far, and make this life upon a limiting earth a climb towards summits, vanishing in the void, a search for the glory of the impossible. Well, life has all these different shades, has these different modes, but what does it do? All the cycles of desire, through all that and through hounds of mind and life, there is this thing, the finale is these last two lines where it says, a climb towards summits vanishing in the void, a search for the glory of the impossible. You see, we do live through all these ups and downs, the cycles of desire, and there is a hounding of the mind and life. But through all this, life is ultimately taking us, the human beings, towards summits vanishing in the void. That means towards a greater destiny, and that destiny's heights are beyond the material and the physical. So it's a kind of a summit which is not seen, which is not visible. So the summits are vanishing in the void, a search for the glory of the impossible. Then it says, it dreamed of that which never has been known. It grasped at that which never has been won. It chased into an Elysian memory the charm that flee from the heart's soon lost delight. You see, again, it's the same life with all its longings, miracles, upheavals, up and down. But what is important is, it dreams of that which has never been known. So there is a destiny, there is an aim, and an aim which most of us do not know. There is a destiny which is not revealed. But there is a destiny, an end, and grasped at it which has never been won till now. It chased into an Elysian memory. It is Elysian. This comes from the Greek mythology of Elysium. It's a home of the blessed after death. It's in Greek mythology is believed that after the death, the blessed ones, not everyone, the blessed ones, the spiritual ones, the chosen ones, they are sent to this world called the Elysium, and so it chased into an Elysium memory the charm that flee from the heart's soon lost delight. So life also gives us that kind of a Elysium, that kind of a peak, which for the blessed ones. It dared the force that slays, the joys that hurt, the image shape of unaccomplished things, and the summons of a Circean transmuting dance, and passion's tendency of the courts of love, and the wild beasts ramp and roam with beauty and life. Again, this is a description of the movements of life. Now, this one word, maybe some of you know, some of you may not know, Circean transmuting dance. Circe is again the ancient Greek mythology, is a mythological enchantress who, with her magical powers, changes men into animals. So this is a kind of a power, what is called the enchantress, which can curse a man, a person, and transform them into animals. So it's that word transforming that is being used by Sri Aurobindo here, when he's saying the image shape of unaccomplished things, and the summons to a Circean transmuting dance, and passion's tendency of the courts of love, and the wild beasts ramp and roam with beauty and life. So this is again, giving us this image of life, which is playing, which is transforming, which is changing eternally, with the beasts ramp and roam. You see, ramp, of course, is the normal ramp when we go up the slope, and romp is the frolic, is the fun. So to sum it up, if I can see it like this, that with all its chaos, with all its formlessness, with all its contradictions, life is still moving towards a higher aim, a higher destiny, and transforming our lives into something greater, into a life of beauty and life and delight and all that. So, but at present we do not know what it is because we are steeped in it. Now again there is a longer description, a more powerful description of the contraries and the contradictions that we have in life. There's a whole 5-7 lines which are really powerful. You see that? It brought its cry and surge of opposite powers. That's the same word I wanted to say. The opposite powers of life. What are they? Its moments of the touch of luminous plains, its flame ascensions and sky-pitched vast attempts, its fiery towers of dream built on the winds, its sinkings towards the darkness and the abyss, its honey of tenderness, its sharp wine of hate. You see, these are the opposites that now he is bringing in. Its honey of tenderness, its sharp wine of hate, its changes of sun and cloud, of laughter and tears, its bottomless danger pits and swallowing gulfs, its fear and joy and ecstasy and despair, its occult wizardries, its simple lines and great communions and uplifting moves, its faith in heaven, its intercourse with hell. Marvelous lines, you see, which really give us a graphic image of our own life, that how everything, we have experienced all this honey of tenderness, sharp wine of hate, change of sun and cloud into laughter and tears, joy and ecstasy and despair, and wizardries and simple lines, faith in heaven. You see, this is a beautiful line. It's faith in heaven, it's intercourse with hell. Yeah, that's really one of the greatest contradictions that we see in life. We seem to be all aspiring for something higher, nobler, what we call spiritual, but we do not leave our intercourse with hell, with the lower nature. We continue to be connected with the hell, with hellish things, but there are moments we are wanting to be in that great spiritual heights. But that's the contradiction of life. These powers were not blunt with the dead weight of earth. They gave ambrosia's taste and poison's sting. You see the same again contradictions, ambrosia's taste and poison's sting. There was an ardor in the gaze of life that saw heaven blue in the grey air of night. The impulses Godward soared on passion's wings. Minds' quick-paced thoughts floated from their high necks, a glowing splendor as of an irised mane, a parure of pure intuition's light. Its flame-foot gallop they could imitate. Mind's voices mimicked inspiration's stress, its ictus of infallibility, its speed and lightning, heaven leap of the gods. See again, here the poet is really at his best to give us very sharp, very short, brief sketches of the opposite things in life. Again and again we get the image here. They saw heaven blue in the grey air of night. Night is capital N. The impulses Godward soared on passion's wings. You see, this is again a contradiction, because Godward impulses cannot be carried by passion. They have to be carried by aspiration, not these lower emotions of passion which are drawing us downwards. So but we have again a contradiction. We think of the divine, we think of God, but there is the passion, the vital passion. This is again a contradiction. And then we see here, mind's quick-paced thoughts floated from their high necks, a glowing splendor as of an irised mane. That is, of course, this is a positive thing, that how mind is really coming up with his great thoughts. Now, imagine this irised mane, the mane of a horse. That is as if the thoughts are flying into the sky, and you see the mane of the horse, the flying, the beautiful flexible mane. That's a poetic imagery. Now it says, a parure of pure intuition's light. A parure is a set of matching jewelry. So now what is the matching jewelry here? Intuition and mind. Mind's imitation. You see, there is a true intuition. Its flame-foot gallop they could imitate. Mind's voices mimicked inspiration's stress. You see, the mind is imitating. So what is the set of matching jewelry? One is the intuition, the other is the mimicry, other is the imitation. So it is, as we say, imitation gold, imitation line, imitation jewelry. So the mind is an expert in imitating its own intuition. So that is there in life also. We have a parure of pure intuition's light, its flame-foot gallop they could imitate, mind's voices mimicked inspiration's stress, its ictus of infallibility. You see, there is a ictus is a stroke, a stress, what we call in poetry iambic pentameter. Long, short, 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 long, long. These are the stresses. And it says mind is again imitating these rhythms of life. But I stopped here because this Savitri is supposed to be in iambic pentameter. It is, short, long, long. Then this line is so short, you see, it's ictus of infallibility. There are hardly two words, ictus and infallibility. So I tried to trace out the rhythmic gap, and I found that, you see, it's ictus, short, long, short, off again short, and in is stress, fallible is stress, li is unstressed. So like that, what's wonderful is, imagine the poet maintaining this iambic pentameter throughout this 24,000 lines without breaking it. That's what is remarkable. It's not that he would have, thought over it and say, how do I do, which is the word. That's what is called the poetic inspiration. It comes with imagery and with a proper rhythm. We have been used to this, what we call rhyming words, and joy and toy and boy, and there also when we write a poem like that, we rack our brains what can go with the image, and then we say image means rage. We get the word rage, and then we try to push it into the line and say somewhere, and then we got into the rage, and it was a great image. So with the normal poet, imagine the rhyming words themselves are so difficult. But here is a poet who doesn't go by the rhyming word. That is a kind of a kindergarten poetry, Of course, when Shakespeare did his sonnets, it was already into graduation. But most of us, we write the kindergarten poetry or primary poetry, trying to have these rhyming words, which in modern poetry, I think it was first done very boldly by Walt Whitman, who broke all this rhyming and all that. He said, rhythm is important, life is rhythm and not rhyme. So he gave a kind of a poetic freedom to the poets, and there we could have the rhythm. And that is the rhythm that comes into Savitri. And that is the rhythm that is there in our ancient languages, and Sanskrit. We never followed a rhyme, it was always the rhythm. Because rhythm is basic to life, and rhyme is, is the kindergarten's mental poetizing. So, if you have time, get into this. Its ictus of infallibility is again the same poetic iambic pentameter. Its speed and lightning heaven leap of the gods. A trenchant blade that showed the nets of doubt. Its sword of discernment seemed almost divine. Yet all that knowledge was a borrowed son's. The form that came were not heaven's native births. Its puissance, dangerous and absolute, could mingle poison with the wine of God. You see, this is again describing the other side of life, of course, which we said does imitate, like we said, the mind's intercourse with hell and faith in heaven. Similarly, life also has this dangerous attitude, dangerous possibilities of bringing in the falsehood. How does it bring here? He says, the form that came were not heaven's native births. Its puissance, dangerous and absolute, could mingle poison with the wine of God. You see how life brings in falsehood. Pardon me?
This next line.
I think mine is an older version. Maybe I do not have a couple of lines. This is 1954 edition.
In a voice could speak the unreal's word.
Before the God could mingle poison?
Its puissance, dangerous and absolute, could mingle poison with the wine of God.
Oh, could mingle before?
Yes. Before.
Yeah, it's the same thing, the same imagery, the contrary is how falsehood slips into this life, How there is a mingling of poison with wine of God, as you said again. This is the same imagery, which I don't have unfortunately. Yeah, this is a 1954 edition, and after that much work has been done, as most of you know. Revision took place, and some lines have been added. You can imagine, as we see from Nirod Baran's writing of how Savitri was written. Those days there's no question of your computers or anything. So he used to write in a notebook paper, and the notebooks were also not classified or numbered or dated. So later on, these people, of course, this was given, but when they started reviewing these notebooks, it was a quite a pell-mell. So Sri Aurobindo would suddenly say, Nirod, open that book, that line that I told you yesterday or 10 days back or something. So Nirod Baran would fish out that thing from the almirah, take out that paper, and then he would say, add these lines. Now where do you add them, before or later or in the middle? Because you see, nobody dared question and say, hey master, where? He said, okay sir, and he started noting down. So Nirod Baran noted down those lines, but he forgot or he was not instructed to exactly through which line this must be inserted. So they were left as an additional line, and the editors later said we could not find a meaning to that. Some of them were left as left in the manuscripts. It's only in 1993 they tried to make sense of all these missing passages or added passages. So some of these lines, like you're saying, have been inserted. And that is where people said, again, why do you want to insert new lines? 1954 is an edition that the mother herself saw. So let this be as it is. And maybe the line that you have found anew could be added at the end of the book saying, these lines were found on so and so page. So leave it to the reader, instead of creating a kind of a controversy between the edits. That's the story. So that's how some of these lines were missing in the 54. And 1954, then we had the 1972 edition. That's the birth centenary edition, where again the mother saw some of these things. And there's one thing very beautiful which I should tell you. You see, it seems one day when Sri Aurobindo was writing this, he was not writing, he was dictating actually. He said, Nirod, bring out that line, or that page, or those lines. And then he said, after that line there's a comma, delete that comma. So Nirod looked up the lines and he says, yes, master, there is they would call him not master, AG, Aurobindo Ghosh, So he would say, yes, sir, yes, master, AG, after laughter and tears, there's a comma, remove that. He said, fine. After 10 days, Sri Aurobindo again says, hey, remember I gave you a comma, put it back. So this was the kind of the memory Sri Aurobindo had, that every comma counted. It is not, linguistic thing, chalta hai, you have it or not have it. But it was very particular with every little comma and this and that. That is one of the arguments where Sri Aurobindo was so very particular he wouldn't have forgotten. But it's all, mind's controversies. What's important is we taste the rasa. We have the bliss of the words, we experience. That line comes in front or comes in later, it matters little to our own understanding because we understand nothing. Either it's in front or later. But there is a joy, that there is a kind of a delight, there is an experience. That's what is important. Otherwise, for the future poets, maybe it may be important, but for you and me, I'm sure, if that line was missing, it made hardly any difference to me, because we don't understand, we don't have that experience. Now going forward, on these high shining backs falsehood could ride. You see, that's what we are telling. On these high shining backs falsehood could ride. Truth lay with delight in error's passionate arms. You see, beautiful. Truth lay with delight in error's passionate arms. There is a complete falsehood. Even truth is doing that. Gliding downstream in a blithe gilded barge, she edged her ray with a magnificent lie. A wonderful line. You see, I don't know if you remember this this line, gliding downstream in a blithe gilded barge. This reminds me of Cleopatra. There's a line by Shakespeare where he is describing Cleopatra coming in a barge, gold gilded barge, So there is a kind of a resonance of that. And then who is that? It's the truth which glided downstream in a blithe gilded barge. She edged her ray with a magnificent lie. You see, the barge, the boat is gilded, is decorated. But that decoration Sri Aurobindo is calling is a magnificent lie, is a falsehood. So even truth in this pattern of life is not the truth on the higher level. But on our life level, even truth has this magnificent lie, gilding it, decorating it, because our life is a mixture of truth and falsehood. Here in life's nether realms, all contraries meet. You see, that's the main line. Here in life's nether realms, all contraries meet. Truth stares and does her works with bandaged eyes, and ignorance is wisdom's patron here. Brilliant. Those galloping hoofs in their enthusiast speed could bear to a dangerous intermediate zone, where death walks, wearing a robe of deathless life. You see, this is again the contradiction here, where we, as we said, famous Mahabharata story, when the king was asked, what is the strangest thing of life? He says, every man seeing death all around him never thinks of his own death. So this is the secret of life, that we all think where death walks wearing a robe of deathless life. We see everyone dying, but we never think of our own death. He says, no, I'm living, I will live on as if forever. And we see left and right people are dying. So he says, that is the strangest psychology of man. And the king reveals that in Mahabharata story. And and Sri Aurobindo has a similar line here. Or they enter the valley of the wandering gleam, whence captives or victims of the spacious ray, souls trapped in that region never can escape. You see again the same thing. Or they enter, they is our own people of life, they enter the valley of the wandering gleam. Wandering gleam is a false glimmer. This wandering gleam is a false glimmer. So we get trapped in life's false glimmer. And either we are victims or captives or the spacious. Spacious is not spacious. Spacious is again the word is false. The word spacious means false, false ray. Souls trapped in that region never can escape. Agents, not masters, they serve life's desires, toiling forever in the snare of time. Their bodies born out of some nihil's womb ensnare the spirit in the moment's dreams, then perish, vomiting the immortal soul out of matter's belly into the sink of naught. It's a very strong word, I must say, vomiting the immortal soul, from a poetic point of view. I mean, the vomiting does not give a very good picture for soul, it's, either we say the soul departs or the soul has left the body. But you see, the word is vomiting because he is using the word vomiting because next line it says, out of matter's belly into the sink of naught. Because the soul here is entrapped deep in matter. It's not a soul that is trapped in this human body. It is there in matter. So from matter is being pushed out. The soul is thrown out. So that throwing out, Sri Aurobindo uses the word vomiting, is because it's a forced thing. So he is justified there. Yet some uncaught, unslain can verily pass, carrying truth's image in their sheltered heart, pluck knowledge out of error's screening grip, break paths through the blind walls of little self, then travel on to reach a greater life. But there are some lucky ones, blessed ones, who can carry truth's image in their sheltered heart. In all these contradictions, opposite ways of life, some can escape. With what? With knowledge, pluck knowledge out of error's screening grip, then travel on to reach a greater life. So mostly the human beings are trapped in these oppositions of life, where there is the heaven and hell and contradictions of light and darkness, but some can escape and they go to a greater life. All this streamed past. Now you see, this is a cut-off place. So this description is done. Now Sri Aurobindo is taking us back to Savitri. So he says, all this streamed past her is Savitri, and seemed to her vision's sight, as if around a high and voiceless isle, a clamour of waters from far unknown hills swallowed its narrow banks in crowding waves, and made a hungry world of white wild foam. Hastening, a dragon with 1,000,000 feet, its foam and cry a drunken giant's din, tossing a mane of darkness into God's sky, it embedded receding into a distant roar, then smiled again a large and tranquil air, blue heaven, green earth, partners of beauty's reign, lived as of old, companions in happiness, and the world's heart laughed the joy of life. All now was still, the soil shone dry and pure. Through it all she moved not, plunged not in the vain waves. Out of the vastness of the silent self, life's clamour fled. Her spirit was mute and free. So now we have had a long journey through life. She is tempted. She has been given the temptation, you stay on here. But she sees all this chaos. She does not find the true soul here. It is in life, on the contrary, a melange, a mixture of falsehood and truth. So she says, no, this is not where I can find soul, so I must move on. So we have seen she has come out of the inconscient, she has come out of the sense mind, she has come out of life, and now she goes on to another level or another aspect of life, as we see here, because the next level of the mind comes only after after another 3 pages. So we will see here a higher aspect of life. We have seen the lower aspect of life where it is confusion and chaos. We will see a higher aspect, and there also she enters, but she does not see or find the soul. She comes to the mental level where mind says, nobody can give you the truth, I am the truth. So that's purely the present consciousness where people think that the mind is the highest truth. But then Savitri says, sorry, you too are not the highest truth. So this, you can see, step by step we are led into the higher. So this is a marvelous chapter, as I told you again, Canto, because this, although it's a different search, but symbolically it is the same that all great avatars have gone through. I mean, a different way, to different levels, different depth. But I can see this kind of a search for the soul is the condition, is the prerequisite of life itself. Because as the mother would tell us again and again, and as I told you in the beginning of the class, that this seems to be the real goal, the real venture. All other things are either a wastage of life and time or other a preparation. In any way you can look at it. But we see an interesting journey of Savitri. We'll continue in our next class. Have concentration now.